So, good morning, good afternoon, good late night, good late night, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to start us off, get us kicked off with a rant. I'm very excited about something that just happened last week. Jesus and Jeannie are sitting there smiling because I keep trying to get them whipped up over it, and they're both yawning. This is not yawning material. This is very exciting. So there was an announcement last week. What if you found 100 people? They were average age 55 years old, 60% men, 40% women. And their average LDL was 260. Now, some of you are sitting there thinking, well, that's not too bad. Mine's 230. Let me rephrase that, or let me repeat that so you don't make the mistake. I didn't say total cholesterol. I said LDL, quote, what we used to call, quote, the bad cholesterol. So 260 is a big, big number. You know, when you think about familial hypercholesterolemia, that's usually 180 to 200. And you can obviously go higher than that. But once you get into 260, 300, 350, that's what we call, usually that's going to be the level that you see with homozygous FH. I'm not going to go down that bunny hole right now. I'm going to go back and say, do you know how common an LDL of 260 is? Jesus, Jeannie, either one of you have a guess? How often do you see an LDL in the general population of 260?
1 in 1,000.
Oh, dang, I already told you. It's 1 in 1,000. So they got, as Jeannie termed a few minutes ago, they got 100 unicorns there. So they selected 4 people with high LDLs. There were a couple of other things too, like low triglyceride, high HDL, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So they got another group that had low to normal levels of LDL, but they fit on every other parameter. They were age 55, 60% male. And both groups had plaque, but you would assume, wouldn't you, that if LDL causes plaque, that there would be tons and tons of plaque in the 260 group, right? There wasn't. And so, again, I'm all excited about that. Jeannie, Jesus, the rest of the clinical crowd at our space, PrevMed, just saying, yeah, so what? Brewer, you're being silly. So anyhow, one of our patients and friends alerted me to a presentation done, well, at this point, about 8 days ago, by Dave Feldman. Yes, he's talking about the first developments of his research in lean mass hyperresponders. And yes, they get 100 people there that they selected for having high LDLs. Yes, they also had some fairly unusual, not rare, but fairly unusual metabolic numbers. Triglyceride over HDL of 2 or less. And they didn't have huge plaque like the rest of the medical community would have predicted. So what that begins to, the reason Jesus and Jeannie are yawning about this is we see this all day, every day, where people we get significant number of people coming in that have lean mass hyperresponse. And yes, the evidence is looking more and more like, yes, LDL can matter, but metabolism matters more. Now, over the next few weeks, we will go a little bit deeper into this issue. Daniel Trevor is going to come back, and he and I will talk about metabolic health. If there's a trend that you see in the health-related presentations on YouTube and the internet, you hear a lot of trend about metabolic health. And I think that's a good thing. I think people do need to focus more on what is your metabolic health and less on what is your LDL. And I would love it if the medical community would start doing that as well. So one more comment about this, and then I'll hand it over to you, Jesus. You'll hear Dave Feldman talk about the lipid energy model, and you'll hear him talk about empty boats, LDL levels as LDL particles as empty boats. So here's what he's talking about at a 50,000 foot level. Maybe it's our energy metabolism more so than our LDL level. And yes, I personally believe that is the case. Now, when you start to get into the details, it starts to talk about most of us, whether we think about it or not, come at LDL with an assumption that each LDL particle that you're counting on your lab test was an LDL particle for the past few weeks. And that's not at all the case. It may have been an LDL particle for the past hour or just a few minutes. And a few minutes ago, depending on when you ate, clearly if you ate 8 hours ago, then clearly 8 hours ago, for a few hours, that LDL particle was actually a VLDL or an IDL. And a lot of people watching this channel don't know what I'm talking about, but a lot do. So what's going on is we've got an equilibrium of particles. VLDL, IDL, those two make up remnant cholesterol. And despite the debate that you might hear on the internet about, is HDL really good? Is LDL really bad for you as we thought? I'm going to won't get into that debate, but I will say that almost everybody agrees remnant cholesterol causes plaque buildup, atherosclerosis. And that's what we're talking about. We are the lipid energy model, and you don't have to remember this today. I realize I'm going real deep in a couple of areas, but the lipid energy model talks about the fact that when we eat, we bring on fats. You add those fats, those triglycerides, to an LDL particle. And the LDL particle actually transports that fat, that triglyceride. When it transports it peripherally to the muscle, it drops it off. Then it becomes an LDL particle again. These lean mass hyperresponders appear to be a subgroup genetically, a subgroup of people who, when they go low carb, something stimulates them to make more and more LDL, to have those empty LDL boats so they can carry that triglyceride. At the end of the day, that's an interesting, it's an interesting subgroup. It's interesting for that population, but it makes a much, much bigger statement for all of the rest of us. And that statement is, maybe it's not LDL doing the damage. Maybe it's our metabolic state. So thank you for listening to my rant on a group of 100 people whose average LDL was 260 and did not have plaque. They did not have any, or they had some, but they did not have the kind of plaque that almost every doctor in the world would expect them to have. Okay, I'm done with my rant. Jesus, why don't you go on with the rest of the intro?
We started strong today.
What's that?
We started strong today.
Yes.
How's that for a sneak peek for next week?
There you go. We'll cover it a little bit more deeply and Jesus is actually going to get off the dime and create some visuals on it so we can talk about those.
Yeah.
Next week, not this week.
No,
next week.
What's that?
No, next week. Yes. I hit you with a barrage of slide requests over the holidays. So
I have like 3,000 emails on my inbox just from Dr. Brewer about slides. So my days needs to start becoming 48 hours.
there you go.
Able to catch up. No, and I can tell you, we were discussing about if we have talked about this in the past, and I had to go deep into the channel, and 5 months ago we covered what was the starting point of this research. At that
Uh,
moment, at that moment they had 64 subjects, and
oh,
the
well, so
average
they
was,
looked at the prevalence of plaque or the
yes,
average LDL.
yeah. So the
Oh, I
average
didn't
at
remember
the
that.
average at that moment was 233. That's
Oh,
the top 0.1%. And 61% of them had a calcium score of 0.
wow. I don't
8%.
remember that.
I did remember it. So I maybe that's why I wasn't so stunned, because I was like, I think we have talked about this. Of course,
You
this
said
is
that.
newer.
I didn't listen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not news for me. So, I mean
That's a big number.
that you won't listen to me. That's what's not news.
So now you can complain that I don't listen, and I'll acknowledge that it's true. So you should dig up that slide
Yeah.
and present that as part of our program next week.
Yeah, definitely, because that's what has happened 5 months from that day to today.
Interesting.
And yes,
Taking them a while, isn't it?
only 2% of them had a calcium score of 300 or more.
Wow.
So it's interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay, so let's kick off then. We always get a complaint that when are you going to start talking about the main show? So we need to give the intro first. And my name is Jesus Vega. I'm a physician in Mexico, and been working with Dr. Brewer for a while now. I'll let Jeannie to introduce herself for those who are new to the channel, and then we can keep on moving.
Hello, good morning. I am Jeannie Shanholzer. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I work with Dr. Brewer and Dr. Vega. And I've been with the practice a few months and have learned a lot myself and really enjoy it.
Sounds good. Like we all have. We always learn from our viewers and our patients, so it's very interesting. So today we're gonna be talking about resistant starch, which can become of a trend lately. The last few weeks, we have seen more and more information, more shorts on more TikToks about resistant starch and how this can be a really good option for people with diabetes and glucose metabolism issues. And we're gonna discuss that if that's really the case or not. We also, for a short topic for today, we have 7 tips for step counters. So if you are concerned about how much you are walking and how to measure that, we're going to discuss a few tips that Dr. Brewer found on the Washington Post. So that's from one of those 80,000 emails that I got to read and put in here. And the last week, we discussed a hidden risk factor for premature aging. So go into that video, and like 30 seconds after we start, Dr. Brew will tell you that is hydration. So, but if you want to stay for longer and know a little bit more of the details, stay on it. It's really interesting. We also discussed the AHA, the American Heart Association, score on different diets. Not news to us that low carb diet was labeled as not as adequate according to them, but we had a really, really interesting discussion about that. And also another video that was a surprise for us is on the impact and the eyes that it got is colchicine as a cardiovascular inflammation anti-inflammatory. We knew this. Dr. Brewer has covered this in the past, but it was really interesting to see that a lot of people were interested in colchicine. So interesting stuff right there. If you go to the YouTube channel, endless and endless hours of interesting life-saving information. If you want to have something more than just general information and you would like to know, well, what I can do for my individual situation, go to our website, www.prevmedhealth.com, and you can book an appointment with Dr. Brewer and the team, so you can get a more personalized opinion on your specific case. Because as you know, Dr. Brewer here on the channel won't tell you what to do. I'm sorry, this is not the place to get medical advice. And Dr. Brewer will only tell you what he is willing to do. Well, and that's good as well. But if you want a more in-depth, specific advice for your case, you will need to go over that website and book an appointment.
Well, you've got room to talk, being the answer Nazi.
Yeah, and I'm hoping Gilbert has that image ready that he prepared. It's really good. I loved it.
I haven't.
But I'm not gonna spoil that unless
Okay.
unlike Dr. Brewer likes to do. I'm gonna let you hanging in there and waiting for the Q&A to see it.
So if you'll go back to the last slide, actually I can do that, can I? I just wanted to make a brief comment. I really appreciate the response that we've gotten as we've started to open up for care. I hate to say it, it's true. Well, I've got mixed emotions. Part of me likes to hear that we've got a waiting list. I hate for the patients that we've got such a waiting list to get care from us. We're very, very excited about managing individual care for folks. I used to do it a little bit on the side. Now we're expanding. That was part of Jeannie coming on board. We've got another NP, Heather, who has joined us. We've got other folks, a couple of other people that have joined us, physicians who are helping us in terms of quality. Jesus still does a lot of what we call scribing. And we're going to talk about scribing for a second on the next deck. But just wanted to say thank you for the interest that we've had, and also a statement that we are doing the best that we can to scale, to expand, to provide good quality care for all the folks that are interested. And by the way, we are having incredible challenges with Medicare. We're not surprised. I've been in that world in the past. I've been much more in a Medicare Advantage world, which is very, very different, much more rational. And many of you have heard straight or traditional Medicare, fee-for-service is a very, very difficult world because you've got folks that are more bureaucratic in perspective, basically making medical decisions. Well, we'll pay for this, but we won't pay for that. And by the way, we won't pay for a CIMT. We won't pay for most cardiovascular inflammation testing. We only pay for OGTT at certain times. We don't pay for an insulin response. And it's just like, as you can see, it's a headache. Let me just make this comment. Another thing that happens is unmet expectations. Folks hear us on the channel and they get excited about what we know about medicine. So when you look at what we do, we're different from the vast majority of docs in the world. Most prevention is provided by a family practitioner, an internist, cardiologist, all doctors who did not train in prevention. They may say, yeah, we did. No, they didn't. They trained in medicine. And one of the key things that we do, and you look at it, it sounds like me being a little bit elitist or whatever. That's not, yes, I'm sure I am in that space.
A little bit.
There's more to it than that. There's true evidence. It's really clear. Folks at Hopkins started seeing it, then Harvard, Mayo. It's really clear out there. The evidence is this. 2/3 to 3/4 of primary care docs, meaning family practitioners, internists, cardiologists, do not know how to make the diagnosis of the most common root cause of heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's, the basic chronic diseases, and that is prediabetes. Now, if you cannot make the diagnosis of prediabetes, how in the heck can you manage it? And yes, that same evidence is really clear. They don't know how to manage it either. And so that is a major, major disconnect in our world. So patients see that. We talk about that on the videos. They're able to go in and find videos at any time, 2 a.m, where we explain a certain thing. Like in a few weeks, there'll be videos about resistant starch that they can go access. So sometimes you make a connection and it's not entirely realistic. So we have people come on and they have an expectation. For example, here's what happens in a routine medical practice. The expectation doesn't quite meet the reality. You think that you're going to go see the doc. You think that you're going to be having a doc who's listening to your concerns the vast majority of the time that you're together. And what you don't realize is that there's a lot of requirements for documentation. There's a lot of true medical quality concerns, which require the ability to get through an EMR, electronic medical record. The reality in most practices is that the doc is spending more time struggling. The doc or the NP, the provider, is spending more time struggling with their EMR and their documentation requirements than they are with actually listening to you. And that's reality. And it's a big unmet expectation. So patients get frustrated. They get mad. My doctor didn't even hear me. My doctor didn't listen. So we do use a process that we call scribing. And that's what I mentioned back on the last slide. Jesus, Jeannie and Heather and others have done scribing work for us. We've got another scribe that's coming on, physician trained. So I can, when I'm seeing the patient, spend more time with you. So that's a big plus. Jeannie can spend more time when she's with you. Again, another big plus. But then, like I said, there are also some unrealistic expectations in terms of our practice. I was off this past Friday, and we had one patient, for example, saying, I want Dr. Brewer to see my supplements list, and I want him to give me a call. And it's like, Dr. Brewer is on vacation. You may be able to pull up all of his videos 24/7, but you can't pull him up. He is a human being, and we can only spread his time around. So we get a lot of that right now. We're working through a lot of that. Jeannie, any comments on as you and I discussed, you're taking a major brunt of a lot of that frustration, a lot of that unmet expectation, and a lot of unrealistic expectation. I respect and appreciate your ability to do that. Any comments on what it looks like from that perspective?
No, it's sometimes we, patients, it's kind of rare, but occasionally it does happen. And, all of the nurse practitioners in the practice are trained by Dr. Brewer. The responses we give you are Dr. Brewer approved. And, if there's a question I don't know the answer to, then I definitely will reach out to him. But know that when we're seeing you, we're under the, the Dr. Brewer method, and that's what we're applying to the practice and to your visit. So I know we're not Dr. Brewer, but we are trained by him, and we are the outreach of him where he can't be. So that's all.
So thank you for bringing that up. The training method is far deeper than what you see in most programs. I come from having managed and managed the performance of over 700 doctors in one group. So you have to do a lot of things other than just run into them in the hallway, which is what you tend to see with a smaller practice. We have an entire learning resource center, tons of videos, all of which you have to go through. There's some basic reading curriculum that you have to go through before you get on our staff. And then you spend about a month seeing patients with me. So there's a lot more intense training in our group than you tend to see in other groups. Any other?
And
go ahead, Jeannie.
No, I was just going to say that, and one of the things that I think that happens, and especially it happened with me, you know, I'm Missourian, born and bred, and our logo on our state license plates is we're the Show Me State. So that means we don't, just because you tell us to do something, we don't do it. You have to prove it. And I've seen it in the lab work, and I, you know, I'm very candid in sharing that I believe it because I see it. I see the labs, I've looked at them, and it is shocking the difference that it makes in someone's life when they do the recommendations that Dr. Brewer gives out. And that's why, you know, any nurse practitioners that come on, any other physicians, no one's here because for a paycheck. We're here because we believe in it. So
what I was going to say is also, as you might know, Dr. Brewer is supposed to be retired, and he's now working a 9 to 5 again. So that's part of the scaling. We're trying Dr. Brewer to be more in a supervising role and making sure that everything is going according to the method that he developed. And you're going to see that more often. So I know that for some people, it might be frustrated. They want to see the man. But sometimes the man needs to rest, needs to breathe, needs to take a nap. I mean, he's retired, people. And the thing that he's doing right now on the channel, that's saving lives already. We have one person saying, hey, Dr. Bruce is really expensive. I thought he cared about people. Yeah, he does. Just look at the YouTube channel. So if you want a more specific recommendation, yes, Dr. Bruce is still seeing patients right now. But as we move on, as we grow, that's going to be happening less often and less often. But you got to know that the people who is providing the service is basically like if you were talking to Dr. Brewer.
To Jeannie's point about being from Missouri and the Show Me State, Fred is pretty open. Fred helps us. He's working with us on our recruiting, and he sent me a doc the other day. Fred is pretty open about, no, this is Dr. Brewer's system. You got to do his system. And I interviewed a doc, and this happens a lot. And they're a little bit standoffish at first. And then you start talking, and then you start getting into the detail. And this doc said the same thing that multiple others have said. Yeah, I was a little bit nervous. It sounded like a cult, and it sounded like you were maybe a cult leader. And it's like, I don't have the power of personality. I could never be a cult leader. I'm just too dry. But the facts, as Jeannie said, you know, even if you're from Missouri, you look at what's going on, and the facts slap you in the face. You don't need a cult leader once you start looking. No. So anyhow, anything on that before we go to labs and Jeannie helping folks sift through that pain? We all know why tests guess. Well, here's one. I mean, why? I got it back. Why guess? Yes. But here's one of the reasons why. Sometimes it's easier to just guess. You may regret it, but sometimes labs are a challenge. So one of Jeannie's jobs is to help people understand how to get the most out of their labs. Jeannie, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of our challenges is lab work, and we do order labs that aren't often seen in the laboratory. So we do try to educate our patients before they go, just to make the process a little bit less stressful for everybody. And I will report that we are seeing very positive effects of that. And even with different patients as they're coming back, we are seeing the insulin response scores and things. So people knowing what to look for and to get done while they're there is really helping. So we often we electronically send all labs to Quest. That's where we send the labs, but we also send a hard copy so that you can go to any lab of your choice. We don't have any special connection with Quest. We just, they do use the cardiac IQ testing, and I think they bought it. Was it Cleveland Heart Lab? Is that who they acquired? Okay. And so they just, I'm going to be honest, the way that they present it over time is beautiful because we can see each quarter, and that's really where you can see the progress. The way it comes across to us is great for, you know, a clinician reading that lab work, and it's encouraging to a patient too, because you can see your progress. So again, we have no financial incentive to recommend them. We recommend them because their systems and formats of the cardiovascular prevention testing is the best that we've seen. All laboratories are prone to making mistakes. Everybody's human. Everybody's short-staffed everywhere. That seems to be an ongoing theme. But, you know, when we send you, we prepare you the best we can. We encourage you to make an appointment. And generally when people make the appointments with the labs, they get them in and get them moving quickly. So that's not so bad. We send our orders electronically. Again, we talked about that. And the test can take up to 3 weeks to process. So just kind of plan ahead. We like to have those labs quarterly, and we will send them. We give you plenty of time, but that it's very pertinent to your appointment that we have those back so we can review them with you, because that's part of the reason that people come. So schedule your labs ahead of time. It's very easy. I know I've done it myself, where you can go online and just get them scheduled, and they are just very eye-opening for everyone. And most of our patients have read their labs, and they are excited when they return to us with their lab work. And because, you know, we try to be very upfront and honest with what we're looking for, and you know, what's the positive and what's negative, and it's just really good. But our patients come to us very informed and ready to make changes they need to make. Jesus or Dr. Brewer, anything?
Yes, thank you. I do have one more comment before we get off of the labs discussion. As we've said, a couple of the labs that are really critical to us and that you tend to see more with us than others are the OGTT, the insulin response associated with the OGTT. In other words, how much insulin, well, with OGTT, it's how do you actually metabolize glucose? It's not what your fasting glucose is and trying to manipulate that by using things like HOMA-IR. It's how you actually metabolize it, a moving picture. And then the insulin response shows how much insulin it's requiring for you to actually metabolize that glucose. The lipid fractionation, the cholesterol fractionation, sounds like a cholesterol test. When you actually get deeper into understanding it, you're realizing that we're using the actual bell curves of LDL and HDL to understand what's going on with carb metabolism, not so much the lipids themselves, the cholesterol. So those tests can be difficult. CIMT is another test that can be difficult. But at the end of the day, it gets back to what we said a few minutes ago about most practices really not being trained in prevention. What's going on in chronic disease is our metabolism changes. After months, years, decades of metabolic problems, challenges with metabolic health, it actually starts to damage the tissue. So for example, if your blood glucose tends to stay a little bit too high, a little bit too long, after decades, it's going to burn up your kidneys, your eyeballs, your brain, the arteries that go to every part of your body, including the arteries to the heart. And it can, you know, I don't need to say it. I say it at least 6 times every show. It is the number one cause of death and disability. The difference between us and the vast majority of practices is we don't wait to see the damage to your arteries or your eyes or your kidneys. We're looking long before that happens. And so that's why we're looking at labs. We're looking at the changes in your metabolism before you get the damage to your tissues. So that's why labs are important. Thank you.
I think if Dr. Brewer was a cult leader, we can call this the cult cholesterol panel. That's my bad joke for the day. So
Really bad joke. You're right.
okay, so I have my chronometer right here. We're trying to create shorts as well, so I'm gonna go over these 7 tips for step counters in less than a minute.
There you go.
Let's see if I can do this.
So you mean chronometer in terms of stopwatch, not chronometer in terms of food software.
Yeah, stopwatch. So let's do this. So 7 tips for step counters. This is from the Washington Post, was shared with me on one of those 30,000 emails that he sends. And the first one is your step count might be lower than you think. The study of Lancet showed that for those over 60, they might need around 8,000 steps at least on a week to get to a good point. Less than 6,000 for less than 60. Even a small increase in daily steps like 500 a day might be enough for you. You don't need an expensive step counter. Just a watch on an Android device, an Apple device will work. Learn the step count math. 1,000 steps equals like a half a mile. The speed doesn't matter. You can go as slow as you want. And this is not about weight loss. This is not about burning calories. It's about moving and increasing your metabolism. And it's easier to count steps than minutes of exercise. That's 1 minute. So now we can discuss we can discuss more. But that was just 1 minute for a short video.
So part of your point is not so much that you're getting lower steps than you think. It's that you can get a positive impact. It doesn't with less than 10,000 steps. The urban myth is that it has to be 10,000 a day, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't.
No, even 500 will do the work. And on this article, they interviewed a couple of experts in the field. And I know I've been up on experts and saying, oh, that's not the opinion you want to hear. But take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, there's evidence behind this, and I agree with them when they say I don't recommend following physical activity guidelines for Americans because who reads guidelines, right? And they might have something really good, and moving and exercising it's important, but sometimes we kind of think that we should go over the top. And of course, walking might not be enough to control a lot of the risk factors, but it has benefits. And if you ask me, what do I choose if I will go and walk for 20 minutes or just walk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then do some HIIT, probably I'll choose the second one.
Yeah. So that was an important point. Most people are going to miss it because it's got conditions in it. I'll tell you what a lot of people are going to remember. They're going to remember that Dr. Vega said you only have to do 500 steps and it does as much good as everything as 10,000. Is that what you really said?
I think partially yes. I'm not saying it's enough for the purposes. I'm saying that probably 500 a day versus 10,000 a day might be enough for the purposes of walking.
I would agree 500 is better than most people think. And I'd also say when you're looking at 60, 70, 80, 90-year-olds, 5,000, which they're saying is not, most people think is not nearly enough, is probably getting those folks 90 to 95% there. And they just don't know it. And that was the whole point behind this article.
Yep. It's better
and I would also agree with you on your last statement, the one that had some conditions in it, and it's a little bit fuzzy and therefore much harder to remember. You're much better off doing a lower number of steps. The steps are important, but if you can do a lower number of steps and then turn around and add some HIIT training on top of that, big influence, big help.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's got a little bit of, that's a little bit more complicated. So therefore, much harder.
Yeah, and it's better than being a couch potato. And talking about potatoes,
Oh,
how about that for a segue?
there we go.
Okay, so as usual, after 30 minutes, 40 minutes, we're ready to go to the main show, right?
If you'll give us the water ball, Gilbert. So speaking of which, I have to make a tongue-in-cheek comment about the advice that we get. We get a lot of advice about how to run the show by people that don't have a channel or a show. So we understand, and a lot of the advice is you can't argue with it. For example, I cannot argue with the fact that, yeah, it's taken us half an hour to get to the content on the title. But you know what? There's a lot of good content out there. And within 30 seconds, I started into some good content. We're not going to give up all the different things that happened during the week or weeks before in order to just cover one item. Now, if you do want that, and a lot of people do, not everybody wants to listen to it for an hour and a half. We know that. So Jesus and the content team do some things to help make this a lot easier for you. For example, if you'll look the other days of the week, it's going to be what? 3 days we have a YouTube short, less than a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 or 3 days a week, we'll have 8 to 12 minute content. And on that 1 minute, obviously, it doesn't take half an hour to get to the point. We get immediately to the point. 3 days a week. So, yep, we know that the YouTube Live is it can go into interviews. It goes into a lot of different things, and it's longer, but it's a different kind of show. If you haven't seen our shorts, if you haven't seen our 8 to 12 minute content, take a look.
And also, I think the Wednesdays YouTube Lives are for the hardcore followers of the channel, the people who like to see you for less than 1 hour, for more than 1 hour, and going on over all these other topics. And you get a lot of stuff here that we don't put on shorts as well.
Oh, yeah.
We don't put on 15, 20 minutes because sometimes it's hard to label that, and it's still really good information. And so it's kind of exclusive at in some form as well, to be able to endure 1.5 hours of Dr. Vega trying to say something. Yeah.
So tell us about resistant starch. Everybody wants to get on that resistant starch bandwagon and say, you know what? I can eat this rice. All I have to do is put it in the refrigerator and then get it back out and eat it. And it's not going to increase my glucose. Is that true?
Sounds like a magical thing as well, right?
It does.
Am
I giving us away too much?
You are already, but
okay. Well,
if you ask it that way, that's something that I would like. I will ask to a shaman or something like that. Tell me what I can do to eat anything I want and do not gain weight. And there's a lot of people doing money out of that premise.
Yes,
trying to convince people that they can do everything they want to do, and they show it a person that is shredded and with a 6-pack ab, and they tell, oh, I eat whatever I want, and I eat pizza, and I eat this, and I eat that, and you can do the same thing. And I think that's dangerous and puts people on the hospital long term. So
to your point, there is a major ad campaign going on right now, and for the folks that watch our content free, he does a lot of ads on our show where he talks about, it shows him, he's very ripped, and he talks about eating pizza.
Yeah, be aware of that, because we do not choose what type of ads YouTube puts on out there. It's specific to your own search. So if you're researching about nutrition and what to eat and exercise, you're gonna get stuff like that, unfortunately. So be careful about that. So going back to the topic, resistant starch. So resistant starch, for those who are not familiar with it, probably not many people, but still we need to put kind of a definition on it. Is a portion of a starch that is not digested in the small intestine and is fermented in the colon by microorganisms. And I think the main thing we see as potential and theoretical benefit of resistant starch is that once it is metabolized or processed, better said, by the bacteria in the gut, it can create short chain fatty acids. So this review of the literature is trying to identify if there's any benefits on resistant starch. So they reviewed a couple of articles and they came up with kind of a summary of what's good on resistant starch, if it is any good. Um, One thing that you should be considering is that resistant starch might be treated as fiber at some point or some areas. Uh, at least that's the consideration over here. It's an alpha D glucose that is located in seeds, grains, and tubers in form of granules. There's digestible starch, there's slow digestible starch, and then there is resistant starch, which the definition is not digestible within 120 minutes in the small intestine. And even on resistant starch, you have 5 different classifications according to how limited the digestion is on these ones. And the one that is becoming pretty common is the type 3 resistant starch, or also called retrograded starch.
Easy for you to say.
Well, it's simple, English is easy. So this is
You
this
speak it the way you do.
that is cooked and then cooled down. The long branched chains of amylopectin form double helixes, which cannot be hydrolyzed by digestive enzymes. So basically, they're saying you cook it, then you cool it, and supposedly the chains of glucose are just too tight that your intestine is not going to be able to digest it completely, and it's not going to spike your blood glucose quotes. So I think you might have some opinion on this one, Dr. Brew, right away.
So there. So how did you guess?
If you don't have an opinion, you might as well just trying to translate anything I said.
But I did start to digress for a second. I do want to repeat that. So retrograded starch is formed when you get a starchy food like rice or potatoes, or pasta, then you cook it, then you cool it. And the long branch chains of amylopectin form double helixes or helices. They cannot be hydrolyzed by digestive enzymes. That's at least the theory. And that's what they're classifying this as, retrograde starch. Yeah, I'm kind of skeptic. I mean, theoretically, I do agree that can happen. I don't have any argument with that. What I have an argument with is so many of the YouTube and Instagram and what's the other one? TikTok videos where people put their rice in the refrigerator and then ate it and looked at their blood sugars.
Yeah. And you showed me a video from the serious keto guy. We're gonna discuss that later on.
Okay.
Interesting stuff.
Very good.
So there are also the type 4 resistant starches that are basically man-made, so to say, kind of a potato derivative resistant starch that have a process behind them. And this research found that for this type of resistant starch, there's evidence that suggests that there's a decrease on postprandial glycemia, meaning the blood glucose level or the peak glucose level after you eat. And that can be reduced around 33%, and it can reduce about 88% the overall glucose levels. However, there are multiple factors that can modify the impact of resistant starch, and also consider that these numbers come from really small and not so strong evidence, just small populations. So I don't think it's not as, the results are not as repeatable as you might think, unfortunately.
The
What,
repeatability or lack thereof is my biggest concern. I would even say, maybe there's a place for 33% improvement in postprandial glycemia and 8% overall glucose level. But the problem, and you may see that, we covered something similar to that with that Ezekiel sprouted bread a few weeks ago, where there's a significant decrease. It's a bread, it's a carb, but because it's sprouted, it's a little bit different and significant improvement in glycemia. I think there's a place for that, for example. The problem with this is exactly what you mentioned, the lack of repeatability. So I'm going to get some of this, stick it in the fridge, and I'm going to be okay. Even 33%, I just don't think you can. I think that's the problem.
yeah, and everybody's different. Every brand might be different. Every type of starch might be different. So there's just a lot of variables to consider in it. Um, and I'll come from one of the things that you do actually advise on. It's eating to the glucometer,
Yeah.
getting a Freestyle Libre, Dexcom G6, or wherever. Or if you want to use a finger stick, I mean, there are people who like to feel pain, so that's okay. So just eat, measure your blood glucose, and see what happens, because you can see that even when you are not eating carbohydrates, you can see a glucose spike, and that has to
Yeah.
do something with the liver as well. So everybody's different, and we can have some general recommendations and considerations, but everybody responds differently, even to carbs. So other evidence that they show is that resistant starch, that foods that have resistant starch get fermented in the large intestine, producing methane, hydrogen, and those short chain fatty acids that we just talked about. Is the short chain fatty acids that have been associated with reducing triglycerides and cholesterol, if there's at least 14% of them. 14% resistant starch foods might reduce triglycerides and cholesterol. And the other thing that they have shown is that there's production of butyrate that has been associated with reduced incidence of colon cancer. But the two things to consider here. So these two benefits, the last two benefits that we were just mentioning, again, I think the evidence is just weak right now. And if you are familiar with methane is that gas that comes from farts. So
You just got us banned.
it's not. Do you think? I said methane, not mustard gas. So sometimes it seems
You just said
similar.
farts.
Yeah, will that get us banned?
No, I'm giving
right?
you I'm giving you a hard time.
Okay. No, I mean, at some moment, saying COVID might get you banned. So
That's
it's important.
amazing.
So just so you know, I mean, if you're not something that, if you're not somebody who is farting all the time, and it's not surprised that carbs can cause that. I don't think that decreasing triglycerides and cholesterol a little bit are worth being farting all over the place. I'll rather have my triglycerides slightly high and take care of it with something else.
Yeah, but you're
pay
still
the
young
price.
and in your the social era of your life. Some of us old farts have very, very small social groups, and farting's okay for us.
Well, that might be a cause of divorce for me. So you can see it like taking care of my marriage as well.
Yeah, there you go. But just while we're digressing on things, isn't butyrate one of those short chain fatty acids that they're talking about?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yes, butyrate is one of those short chain fatty acids. That's correct. So it got me wondering if there are other ways to get those short chain fatty acids.
Well, we know that you can buy exogenous ketones.
Yeah.
And short chain fatty acids are very, very similar to ketones.
And I think those don't cause farting.
Yeah.
So resistant starch might reduce the glycemic index of other foods, but vegetables and some saturated fats do the same thing. Short chain fatty acids might induce GLP-1 and peptide double Y, inducing insulin secretion. But there's conflicting evidence regarding the impact in blood glucose of those. And those short chain fatty acids might increase total energy expenditure and fat oxidation, reducing body weight and adipocyte size. So they're saying that some resistant starches might actually help you lose weight, but I don't know. I think this is kind of similar to the conversation we had about apples, about how apples can be really high on fructose, even if they have a low glycemic index and they have a lot of antioxidants. But if you put a balance on them, where's the line of getting the benefits and not the side effects? So I think it's kind of a similar situation here. How much resistant starch is enough for you to lose weight and not gain weight instead?
Well, I'm thinking of a related item in terms of benefits and costs. I know a lot of folks that are listening are sitting there thinking, you keep talking about getting short chain fatty acids from resistant starches when it's fermented in the gut. What's the number one easiest and most common way of getting short chain fatty acids? Dropping your carbs and starting to burn fat.
Okay, so on the last slide, I'm gonna yield for you, Dr. Brewer. This is your specific opinion. These ones are your thoughts on it.
So as I usually do, I spilled the beans earlier. Pardon the pun. Would beans fit in? Well, maybe they wouldn't. I used to be skeptical of resistant starches as well. I mean, like this serious keto guy that Jesus didn't cover today. No, he covered for.
I'm waiting for you.
I've had enough exposure to the evidence and the science among my patients to where I think, there clearly is reality behind some of this stuff with resistant starches. So go there if you really want to. And I get questions about it. Yep. And I have some people who say, you know what, I prefer green bananas. You got to get used to them, but I like them. From my perspective, a green banana, if you like it, makes a heck of a lot more sense than taking white rice or white mashed potatoes and putting them in the refrigerator and hoping that you have turned those molecularly into a double helix that you can't digest. It's just, as Jesus brought up, it's just the repeatability of that is just really, really bad. And if you really, and the other thing we just brought up, if you want to get short chain fatty acids, is this the way to do it? Going around your elbow to get to your thumb, hoping that you've created some resistant starches in a rickety process, and then hoping that your gut biome has generated some short chain fatty acids? Or why not just cut the carbs in your diet and you're going to create butyrate and the other short chain fatty acids? So here's another point. Bread used to be a major food source for me. Before I started limiting my carbs, I was a breadaholic. I have found, and then I quit eating breads when I went lower, when I started restricting my carbs to 100 or less per day. I found that there's some great keto breads now. There didn't used to be. I'm not going to name that name, but it's on there. I found it on Amazon. And if we name brand names, we get demonetized.
I think our last 6 months of shows have been demonetized. I'm sorry about that, Dr. Brewer. By the way, do not drink Herbalife. So you can say your brand now.
So anyway, I really enjoyed the paninis, but here's what I found out was that in the 2 or 3 years from the time I started limiting my carbs to 100 per day or less, my glycemic carbs to 100 per day or less, and the 2 or 3 years it took for low glycemic keto friendly breads to become available, I had just broken my addiction to breads. I just don't enjoy them that much. Just don't eat them that much anymore.
And I can tell you it's happening the same thing to me. I was to be just say a sweets addict, and I think I didn't realize at the moment. Whenever you go to with your family to go outside and go camping or just having a picnic or whatever, you get sandwiches and you get stuff like that. It's just bread over bread over bread, and you just get used to it, and you think it's healthy. And if you think about the traditional food that the kids take to home, the traditional lunch, it's always sandwiches. And at least here in Mexico, what I have seen, to the store that I go, I haven't seen a single slice of bread that doesn't have trans fat, along with a lot of carbohydrates. So it's just
The
right
deadly
there.
combination.
Yeah, and it's just right there, and it's obesity, diabetes, and cancer on the back.
Exactly. Really good point.
And just to the point as well, those green bananas, those are type 2 resistant starches. That's another way, and you might think that it's not. It's still green, so it's just hard enough to not get metabolized in the body. And going back to the point of the serious keto guy video, really interesting stuff. He did a one man test. Of course, it's take it with a pinch of salt as well. And as Jeannie said, take it with a grain of salt. I heard that from some British guys, so they said a pinch of salt. He tested pasta with some tomato sauce. Just after cooking it, his blood sugar spiked and took like 5 hours to stabilize. It's not a really high spike, but he only got like 100 grams of that pasta. So on a plate, you're not gonna take just 100 grams of pasta unless you're really strict on what you're eating, right? And I'm also not saying do not eat any carbs or be on zero carbs. I think, and we have talked about that, if you eat some carbs, like less than 100 grams a day, I mean, there's benefits to it. Still, you might need some carbs, just do not overdo it. Then he tried cooling it for 2 days, same results. His blood sugar spiked, not too high, but it took a lot of time to go back.
Yeah.
Then he tried cooling it and reheating it, and he saw that his blood glucose didn't spike that much and came back fairly quickly. And then he tried cooled pasta with olive oil, and his glucose spiked a little bit, but it took longer to go back. So it's a lot of experimentation here. It's a lot of individual response. There are just so many variables, and I don't know. I'm not saying, in my opinion, I'm not saying not to, but eat to the glucometer and see what happens with your specific case.
So it sounds like you're saying that a great way to blow up a couple of glycemic spikes is to try to create resistant starch by putting your pasta in the refrigerator.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't think I'm gonna do that ever.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is probably if I'm gonna eat some carbs, it's gonna be not that many, and check it with a glucometer and see which ones are the ones that don't spike your glucose that much and allow them to go back quickly.
Well, and it doesn't seem like, that you could, the repeatability is the issue, because, it depends on what you eat before it, what you eat with it, how, if you ate fiber before, and then the green bananas, and what stage of green are they? And there's just a lot of variables going on there. So
if you already have diabetes, your gut biome changes as well. Dr. Brewer has mentioned that as well, and your gut biome might not be fit to metabolize glucose. Uh, there's one. Have you ever heard? I don't know what the brand name is or the name is on English. Acarbose. Does that ring a bell for you?
Almost. Yeah.
It's an old medication, really old medication. It's still being used in Mexico, and this
Hmm.
acarbose is supposed to help you reduce the amount of glucose that you observe on your intestine. And there's some research right over there, and if you remember nopales, we covered that, the cactus
Yeah.
part. If you eat that, it has the same mechanism that acarbose. And now
Oh,
that we're
really?
talking about resistant starches, I mean, there are just some vegetables out there that might have the same impact on lowering the glycemic index of what you eat
Hmm.
without the
Interesting.
fortune.
Very interesting.
Good. So, any additional comments? Would you like to tell them, Dr. Brewer, that you're not going to tell them what to do?
I think they've heard enough of that. I'm not going to tell them that.
So, I think we're ready to go to the Q&A. Gilbert, did you have that image that you prepared? So, right there, do you see it?
Oh, there we go. No answer for you.
So, just like in the Seinfeld episode, the Soup Nazi. This is from Dr. Brewer. I wasn't aware of that until Dr. Brewer mentioned that. Really fun thing. I became kind of the answer Nazi over here, but I'm just politely inviting you to become a YouTube member for the channel. So the way you can do that, Gilbert can show you right away for you. Next to the subscribe button, next to the notifications button that I hope that you already activated as well, you will see the join button to the YouTube channel. So that gives you some perks. And one of those perks is getting an answer from Dr. Brewer here on the channel during the YouTube live. We have always struggled with answering all the questions. We hardly ever do it. I think once we were able to do it.
Yeah, I remember a couple of times, but
But now what we
that was
do
long
is,
ago.
yeah, a long time ago, and we're happy about that. We're glad about that. So become a YouTube member or hit us with a super chat as well. That's another option. And we're just trying to find a way to get to answer some people first than others, and making this a little bit more organized. So if you're not joined to the channel, no answer for you. No, I mean, we're gonna get you. We're gonna get to you when we get to you, of course. So how do
So,
I? How do, yeah,
Gilbert, show that image again. I think you did a great job on Jesus's likeness. Look at that. Looks just like him.
It does look just like him.
it,
What an
it,
artist.
it was a photo. I'm not taking credit from Gilbert. I
Uh,
sent him a photo.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
But it looks just
but
like
Oh,
him.
Gilbert.
but still,
Really good
I don't
artwork.
know how he did that. I'm not a graphic designer, so it's a really good job anyway.
Okay. So, good morning from Atlanta.
So if you see, Rick Folia has a little icon next to to the name. So that's what I'm looking for right here. That's the inspection I do.
There you go.
Tree lady, age 25 to 53, quote normal lipids, age 52 to 69, hyper responder. I'm guessing she saw an increase on her LDL. Concluding this was due to impact of menopause, not FH. Atkins low carber since age 49. Interesting stuff. So, any thoughts?
I
So,
have thoughts. We talked about this yesterday, Dr. Burr.
So go ahead.
Well, yesterday you said that a lot of people don't know they're hyper responders until they go low carb. And that is when they find out. So if she went low carb at 49 during the menopause kind of, or perimenopause, postmenopause, when in that neighborhood, that could be why that's showing up then, because she didn't know before, because she wasn't low carb.
It's a really good point. Our best estimates on FH, familial hypercholesterolemia, is 1 in 200 to 1 in 500. And we still are a little bit fuzzy on that. Now, the current estimates on a lean mass hyperresponder is 1 in 1,000. But as Jeannie brought up, you're only going to find out that you're a lean mass hyperresponder when you go low carb, as in significantly low carb, keto kind of low carb. So we've got a lot of lean mass hyperresponders, a lot of people out there that have the genetics of a lean mass hyperresponder. They just don't know it, though, because they're eating 200 grams of carbs a day and their LDL's not shooting up. Anything else for Tree Lady?
I think estrogens play a key role. So it's been known that estrogens do reduce LDL.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is one reason or just one thing that has been involved in this. I think probably there are multiple factors, and it's also known that that women that are after dealing with menopause or after menopause might have a high cardiovascular risk.
Yeah.
It goes equal with men.
I think that's a really good point. I think we don't know enough about lean mass hyperresponse yet. We do know that a lot of the lean mass hyperresponders are clearly premenopausal, but we also know that menopause has an impact on the other components of cardiovascular risk. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those things interact.
And even if lean mass hyperresponder have a really definite a definition that is fairly clear on what are you looking for a lean mass hyperresponder, there's a lot of people that go low carb and they see at least a slight increase on their LDL. Yeah. And whenever they go back to carbs, they increase their carbs a little bit. The LDL goes down slightly as well. So it just comes to tells you the correlation that is between glucose metabolism and lipid metabolism. And some people might see that they might not be lean mass hyperresponders according to the strict definition, but they have some responses that are pretty similar.
That's a really good point. It brings up the point about, okay, so there must be some increased pressure on the human body generically to make more LDL when you cut carbs. And it probably is associated with that energy, what he calls hypothesis or theory. I would call it energy mechanism. And the issue for a lean mass hyperresponder is genetically, they probably just overreact to that pressure.
Yeah. But this doesn't mean that if you eat a lot of carbs, you're going to have a low LDL. It's just the opposite what happens. Right. So this is not a linear correlation. No, there's a moment where you break the line. You break the line, you eat a lot of carbs, and your LDL is going to go to the roof as well. And in some people they happen to do that, and some people don't. I've seen a lot of people that are obese, they eat a lot of carbs, and their LDL is just normal, but still they have plaque. So that's another population to study, people who have obesity, diabetes, and have normal LDL levels. And still have heart attacks.
What's that?
And still have heart attacks.
Yeah. In fact, the more common problem, what led to the whole assumption and current wisdom that LDL causes this damage is that as people start getting into prediabetes and diabetes, something happens to their metabolism that makes their LDL go up. And the assumption has been, and it's being undermined right now, the assumption has been that LDL is doing the damage.
Yeah. It's interesting because you see a lot of those research. I saw a video from, I don't remember the name. I'll love to give a shout out to this doctor. He does a really good content on YouTube, and he provides some evidence, just similar to what we do here. He shows the evidence, he shows the articles, so you can go over and look for them and read them. And he was talking about statins and relative versus absolute risk. I forgot the name. I'll happy to give a shout out next week. And a lot of the evidence on statins on this, the cardiovascular risk is always related to LDL, always.
Yeah.
So you're missing the point on the impact of statins. Instead of measuring LDL, you should be measuring inflammation. And
Yeah.
even with measuring inflammation, a lot of research is measuring CRP, IL-6,
Mhm. The wrong
TNE,
ones.
TNF, other inflammation markers that, I mean, they're good inflammation markers, but not as clinically relevant as the ones that we search for on a day-to-day basis. So that's my version of a rant.
It was a good rant.
Quite rant.
A good rant. See what happens. You get more chance to talk. You start going down that bunny hole into rant territory.
Yeah, I'm learning from the best. So
I'm not the best. I rant, but not.
Do you think is there anybody who rants better than you, Dr. Brewer?
Oh yes, I'm not a good ranter. I have to get myself worked up.
All right.
We're
So
get Jeannie ranting soon. I think we almost got her ranting about some of the lab frustration last week.
Yeah,
Did.
yeah.
It was a full moon. I'm going to blame it on that. I was a little crabby.
and just so you know, Jeannie has a lot of expertise on mental health as well, and cognitive decline and stuff like that. So we are thinking about covering that stuff. So we can debut Jeannie's rants as well.
That's right. We had a patient call in with some sleep related stuff, and I know enough about sleep to be dangerous. Maybe I know a little bit about sleep, and it's a big topic for me. But I was talking with the clinical team, and it turns out Jeannie's an expert. She's got a lot of experience and background in that space. So we set it up. We had one of our template developers join us for the meeting. I joined just to listen and learn. And we got a lot of great information from Jeannie watching her do that.
Yep. And it's unfortunate because, sleep is such a big issue. And at least for the channel, I haven't seen that much traction on sleep issues. We had a kind of a season of sleep videos, like 1 week, 2 week. And you got a doctor, an expert in sleep. Do you remember the name from that doctor? I forgot right now. When it's names, I always blank on names. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do too.
But even those videos didn't do that good. Still, we want to cover sleep, of course, because of the importance of it. It's just not such a driver of use as other topics. So coming back, JP Tard, when doctors don't listen, I quote Osler to them. Once in a while, it even gets their attention. So you'll love to tell this history.
Jeannie, you know that story?
No.
You ever heard of William Osler?
No.
He was known as the father of American medicine. He was like one of the first medical directors at Hopkins. If you get deeper into the history, they were part of the Rockefeller medicine men. I won't go down that bunny hole, but I will go down the bunny hole of they've got a really nice, beautiful, historic amphitheater there at Hopkins. And I won't go down. I've got a personal bunny hole. I won't go down either, but I will go down this one. Jesus teed me up for that story. So what Jay Petard is talking about is Osler had he was more of a cult leader kind of guy. He was very emotional, very quick to lose his temper. And the junior doctor was interviewing the patient about what the patient had. And Osler had it. He had heard enough. He jumped up. He slammed his hand on the table. And he said, if you'll just listen to the patient, doctor, he's telling you his diagnosis. And the doctor just didn't know what to listen for. So that's the story Jay's talking about. And yes, I mean, it's replete. Doctors, patients will come on in our space. Patients will come on board. Doctors will hear LDL, their ears slammed shut, and they don't hear anything else.
And you see, prevention, at least in Mexico, I can tell you, and I think the US might be similar. I came across one book the other day that was called the 5-minute medical consult, stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Like that. And I was like,
they're-
oh
they're in
man,
favor of it? They're talking about how to do it?
yeah, the 5-minute consultation. And I was like, okay, I mean,
We're talking about
talking
how to
about,
not do that.
yeah,
Mhm.
talking about resilience and stuff like that. So the thing is, in Mexico, there's a joke, right, that we use a lot on public service where the patient comes in and the doctor is writing a prescription. It's like, I'm just going in and you're already writing my prescription. It's like, no, this prescription is for the patient that comes next after you. So it's just the way it is. There's just so limited time on some settings, and believe me, we try to provide patients with at least half an hour of time of provider or talking to somebody, and it goes flying. So we're almost 1 hour and 30 minutes right now, and it goes flying. So Ricky the Gang one, beetroot powder has the ability to increase nitric oxide, which relaxes the blood vessels. Could it be a therapeutic long-term supplement to reduce vascular inflammation and protect the endothelium? Thoughts?
Well, that's clearly the assumption. Do I think that that's probably true? I don't know. I think it probably is. You know, the longer you can be in a healthy state, the more your body gets your tissues get the chance to heal. So I think long term it probably helps, but I'm not aware of significant evidence.
I'm going to say something that might not be really popular, but I'm not as familiar with beetroot powder. I believe there's some evidence. Supplements help. They're not free from side effects either. If the person is willing to take medications for this purpose, and there's of course any other reasons behind taking medications, I'll probably prescribe Cialis before beetroot powder. If you're talking about getting nitric oxide and getting some vasodilation or expanding your vessels, lowering blood pressure, there's evidence that daily doses of Cialis might reduce cardiovascular risk as well. However, there are side effects, of course, to consider, and people with risk of aortic aneurysms might wanna be away from these medications. But what I'm saying is there's evidence for each thing, and supplements are good. However, I don't think somebody can challenge on most cases. Medications are just stronger. There's side effects, of course. I'm not saying to put everybody on medications, but every time you have the discussion between supplements and medications is what do you want to take? So it depends on what you want to expose your body to.
Well, Dr. Burr and I were talking about that earlier, that sometimes people don't want to take certain medications, but then they're taking 30 supplements, and that those are medications. It's just, they're bought over the counter as opposed to being prescribed. So, and we understand all the concerns people have with taking medications, and I'm talking about statins in particular, but you have to weigh the pros and cons of everything, and supplements are still medications in their own right.
And it's just this scrutiny behind medications, and it's easier to find side effects and collateral damage of medications than for supplements. But supplements are not safe. You just got NR that got pulled out because of increased risk of breast cancer, or you got the blueberry muffin. What's the name of it? I don't remember.
Blueberry muffin?
Blueberry.
I'm familiar with the NR, but I wasn't familiar with the blueberry muffin.
I don't remember the name. We covered that. The wife of a senator died after consuming
that. Yes.
Blueberry leaves.
Oh,
yeah, I forgot what it was. Yeah.
But I mean, it's natural. It's supposed to be safe, right?
Well,
it doesn't happen until you
White.
find out.
Wasn't it white something?
Yeah, I don't recall right now. I'm sorry.
Well,
I didn't have enough coffee today.
This thing about supplements too is they're not regulated, right? So they can be anything in them and no one really knows. So that's assuming the people that, I think I remember the beetroot powder. I think it was a big years ago, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, there was some Dana lady and she was selling that beetroot powder. Wasn't that? Do you remember that, Dr. Brewer? Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah,
I
on the
don't.
chat they're helping us, and of course I'm gonna put comments for people who are helping us. Of course,
White
White
mulberry.
mulberry.
I was getting ready to say it's Tom McClinton's wife, Lori, died after taking white mulberry.
So
And
and
it's
we
the
have
berry.
also on the schedule to
Blue,
cover.
blueberry, white mulberry. It's like pretty close.
I mean, English is easy enough until you have to remember something. So,
Jeannie, were
uh,
you sitting over there thinking that Jesus was being very gender, what's the gender exclusive when he was talking about taking Cialis or Cialis?
I was. Yeah, I actually was. And I was thinking, well, what do you care? Do you care about women's blood vessels, Jesus? You don't.
no, oh God, you're putting me here on the spot. I'm saying that there's a benefits risk to assess, of course.
So what should be, is there anything, has anyone studied what would help women?
I think so. I'm gonna put here on my list to cover.
You put that on your 80,000 email list?
There you go.
No, that's the list from Dr. Brewer that I sometimes don't get a chance to review, but I have a list of topics
That he
So,
usually
yeah.
ignores and chooses whatever he wants. That's what he does.
I'm the topic Nazi over here as well.
Yeah, he's
He's
the
right.
PowerPoint Nazi too.
Now, when Dr. Brewer yells at me that he wants something covered the next week, I usually can work overnight on Tuesday. So, no, but I mean, the main point here is just beware of supplements. I mean, sometimes they're not as safe as you may think. JP Tart,
Somebody,
yeah, go ahead.
no, you'll get to it in a little bit. She doesn't. Starving for Life had a question that related to that you might want to cover, even though you're the controller of things, you might want to look down when you're ready.
Okay, so
About
I'm gonna
supplements,
say I'm
medication.
sorry to JP Tart because he went through the effort of joining the channel. Starving myself to life. Quick question: aren't supplements medications free of any chemicals, which makes them fair, safer? I think it's a bold statement to say that supplements don't have chemicals on them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of chemicals in supplements.
There's a process behind there to put them on a capsule.
As Jeannie mentioned, they're far less regulated in terms of those extra substances than prescription meds.
Yeah. And I know how people feel about big pharma. I feel the same way. I'm not saying they're free of sins. A lot of those people are going to go to hell.
He's trying to get us delisted, demonetized, everything.
I'm sorry, Dr. Brewer.
Are you from Missouri? Are you from Missouri, Mexico? You just say what comes to your head, don't you, Jesus?
I hesitated a bit, but it's the reality, and yeah, it is what it is. But that's why you have to go to look at the evidence. And somebody said over here, you have to take care of your own healthcare, and that's true. That's the reality. You have to take care of your own health because even the standard guidelines might have some things that you need to review, and don't believe everything that somebody says, even on YouTube. So
very true. And I got to make a comment. I know it's going to start a fight, but I'm going to make a comment that's going to start a fight. And then I'm going to retract it, and we'll have to move on to something else. Pretty soon, over the next few weeks, we're going to have to cover the new jab, the new vaccine for.
Oh yeah, I saw that email. I'm gonna put it over there.
And you saw Jeannie's response, right?
Yeah, I saw Jeannie's. She was really offended.
Yes, that's
you,
right.
you put a label on her.
So Jeannie's. I thought she didn't you label yourself as an anti-vaxxer?
No, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. What I am is a use your common sense vaxxer and don't just do what you're told because you're told.
Basically an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
No, not true. Not true. I just don't think the vaccines.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
I knew you were looking because you were already trying to discriminate women with not having a special med for them.
I'll yield to that. I don't want that label on me. So
Okay.
Okay.
Anyhow,
So
we'll hold the rest
I-
of that debate for later.
Yes, and I'm
yeah,
not an
yeah.
anti-vaxxer, so we'll talk.
There
We'll
you go.
discuss that more
And I
later.
love women. We're good with that. Okay. Okay. So what a way to put us on the spot. Ourselves. Nobody's doing this. Only ourselves. So James Hart, on a recent day when I spent most of the time laying down, I still had over 2,000, almost 3,000 steps. I suspect that most of us move at least that much most days. Yes. Yes.
Very
What I will also argue is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you do exercise or you move with the purpose of moving, it just has a different impact on your body than just moving because you're doing other chores or stuff like that. You can correct
Fill
me if
me in
I'm
on
wrong.
what you meant there.
I'm gonna look for that research, but I read somewhere that when you exercise and your mind is focused on exercising
Mm.
and you're doing exercise because of that's the purpose, it has a bigger impact on your health than just moving because you're usually moving.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yep.
The intent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
But
that I've seen that.
classify that as a non-expert opinion or comment until I show you the evidence. For all the people from Missouri. So that's
I
just a
wonder who
comment.
that would be.
No.
Peggy Douglas, she's answering to a comment from JML 2921. Yes, hard to get the right tests. I think they're talking about inflammation. Been fighting this issue for 3 months. Think I finally made a breakthrough. Definitely have to be in charge of your own healthcare. Yes, that's what's the comment I was referring to. Getting the right testing is not easy. Convincing your doctor to consider some testing and put their signature on an order is not easy. On resistant starch or any food, it's about individuality. Test, don't guess. CGM or glucometer. Instant pot cooked and cooled organic steel cut oatmeal works for me. So that's the bottom line. Everybody's different, and for some people, it might work. It might have some benefits. I'm not gonna ask Peggy Douglas about the side effects. I think if Peggy's taking them and she's good with that, it works, and it's using the CGM and the glucometer, which is a key thing. Also, what I eat with my RS oats might be making a difference. Always eat protein and fat 1st. Yes. I don't have any additional comment on those things. Do you, Dr. Brewer?
Nope.
Jay Pitard, any chance of getting Matt Walker from US Berkeley on the show for sleep episode? Do
I
you
would
have
love
any
to do that.
connections with
We're
Matthew
not-
Walker?
Say that again.
Do you have any connections with Matthew Walker?
I don't. And, here it's one of the weaknesses of the show. I know that I have not spent a lot of time, invested a lot of time to get a whole bunch of celebrities to appear on the show. And, it's a weakness. And at some point, if we grow enough, I do have a dream that I'll have somebody who a large portion of his or her day involves the networking process required to do that. You look at, there are a lot of shows that do a lot of these, and it takes time.
I just saw a video from Andrew Huberman's channel with Matthew Walker. Matthew basically summarized his book on that episode. So really interesting stuff. And yes, we will love to have guests like him. We're gonna have more guests, and we have different really good guests. And I think the more valuable guests that we have, other than experts, are patients who share their own experiences. And it is the way it is. Histories are more impactful than just data and numbers. When you say 300,000 people, you forget that each one of those 300,000 people have a history.
Yep.
Okay, so we're basically almost 5 minutes after the show. Any other additional comments? I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to all the comments. I mean, I went to all the member comments. So make sure to become a YouTube member. or else. Now we're gonna try to get to you, but today just is the time is up.
Sounds good. Anything else from either of you?
I think I'm good.
To you and to folks listening, thank you so much for your interest. I had to get that in.